is about pronouncing the name of Allah and also AllahHumma. Objectives: to understand how to correctly pronounce the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and also the word AllahHumma. To understand the rules governing the actual pronunciation. So we're going to understand how and why it's pronounced. The rules of the name of Allah. So here we have the name of Allah, which everyone would have seen. So we'll just read the points here. If the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not preceded by any other sound, i.e. not joined to a preceding sound, then read the Hamzatul Wasl as if it carries a fatha. The sound of the voweled lam in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is tafkhim. So let me just explain this. Now, looking at the name of Allah here, you see it's got Hamzatul Wasl, and we've got the first lam, second lam with the shadda and fatha, and then we've got the ha with the dhamma. Now, first thing to notice, the Hamzatul Wasl does not have any sign on it, so no fatha, kasra, dhamma. So initially we need to know how we're going to pronounce this first bit. Now, the Hamzatul Wasl with a lam after it, and they haven't drawn a sukoon on top of it, is actually the definite article al. So in English that's the word the, because the name of Allah is actually a combined word of al, which means the, and ilahun, which is effectively an indefinite version of God, as in a God. So then you put al and ilahun together, you get Allahu, which means the God, and obviously in Islam we know that as the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, so that first Hamzatul Wasl and the lam, which they haven't drawn the sukoon in, is actually al, which is the definite article. And then the second lam we've got here is with the shadda. So we should know by now that the second lam is actually equivalent to one lam with sukoon and then one lam with the sign of whatever's on the shadda, which is fatha in this case. So that's a breakdown of all the lams going on in the name of Allah. And you'll notice there's only 2 lams in the actual name of Allah, but when you break it down there's 3. So when we pronounce the name of Allah with no preceding sound, then you read the Hamzatul Wasl as if it's got a fatha. That's why we've got al. Now the first lam after the indefinite article, so in this case it's the lam with the shadda, is a sun letter, i.e. it's Hurufu Shamsiyah, so it will carry a shadda, and that needs to be connected back to the previous sound, which is the a sound on top of the Hamzatul Wasl, i.e. the fatha. So we're going to join the a to the lam, so we would normally have Allah, but you'll notice everybody says Allah, and the rule of that is that if the lam of Allah, and when we talk about the lam of Allah, we're talking about the lam with the shadda, okay, and specifically out of the lam with sukoon and the lam with fatha in that lam with shadda, we're talking about the sound of the second lam. Okay, so we've got a choice here. We could say Allah or we could say Allah. So we need to know, why does everybody say Allah, not Allah or Allah? Okay, it's Allah. And the ruling is, whatever the sound is before the lam of Allah, i.e. the shaddad lam, if it's a fatha, as we would read it in this case, then the lam of Allah is read as tafkhim. And remember, the tafkhim sounds are heavy, i.e. full mouth, And in English you could compare this to the word large. So when you say the law in large, that's the sound you're looking for. So it becomes Allah. You can't say Allah. Okay, so be very careful. It's Allah, and that's the effect of having the sound of fatha before the lam of Allah. Okay, now we'll talk about how you pronounce the sound of the voweled lam in the name of Allah. So in the preceding slide, that was the second of the two lams in a shaddad lam, i.e. not the lam with sukoon, but the next one after it, which is the lam with fatha, which we call generally the lam of Allah. Now we're going to look at the circumstance when you have the name of Allah preceded by another word, i.e. there is going to be a preceding sound. Now if there is a preceding sound, there are two different ways that the name of Allah can be pronounced. The first one, if the word before the name of Allah it has a kasra sound, i.e. the last sound before the name of Allah is going to be a kasra, then we're going to pronounce the lam of Allah in a light fashion, i.e. tarqiq. So that's light, empty mouth, some people call that. So the sound you're actually going to get on the lam is la, as in the English word lamb. If the sound before the name of Allah is either a fatha or a dhamma, then the lam of Allah is going to be pronounced in a heavy fashion, i.e. tafkhim, or full mouth. So the lam sound will now change to la, as in the English word large. So it's a very simple rule. Look at the last sound before the name Allah. If it's kasra, then the lam is going to be pronounced as la. If the sound before it is not a kasra, then it will be a fatha or a dhamma, and then we pronounce the lam of Allah as tafkhim, which it gives you the sound la. So let's look at some examples. So here we have the very common words, Bismillah. So this is actually Bismillahi. Now, some people who don't know the rules, they might accidentally say Bismillah. You cannot say Bismillah, you must say Bismillah. And the reason for that is the meme is carrying a kasra. Kasra before the name of Allah makes the lam of Allah go tarqiq, i.e. light. So you have to say the a sound, not the r sound. So the lam of Allah becomes la. So it's Bismillah. You cannot say Bismillah. Okay, be very careful on that. So we have Bismillahi. The next one, again, in your